Joshua Hooser is a lawyer by trade and an Isle of Palms resident who's concerned about the future of the city. That's why he's running for mayor this fall. I speak exclusively with him for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Joshua Hooser, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
How are you doing? Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm doing great. I know that obviously you are a lawyer by trade here in Charleston. You live on the Isle of Palms, and just yesterday you made a huge announcement that you're actually running for mayor of the city of the Isle of Palms. In fact, you said this on Twitter, quote, "My name is Joshua Ryan Landon Hooser. I'm running to be the next mayor of the Isle of Palms because these last 18 months have taught me the importance of having local representation for my values in government. Local action has national impact." Let me ask you this, Joshua, as I break this down. What exactly are your values?
Well, I would say that my values are pretty normal, run of the mill. Families first. I believe in God, and I believe that we're all created for a purpose. And right now, my purpose is to run for mayor. I fully support open, free thought, debate, engaging in ideas. And, as the process goes out, whatever the ultimate end is, I just want there to be a fair process. So I try to be as rational as I can when I'm thinking about government and the law and my role and the citizen's role. And I feel as if we've just kind of gotten away from what a citizen's duty is, what a government official's role is. So, now I'm getting into politics. My family's my number one priority. And I think as far as values goes, that's really the most important thing. And now I'm doing this for my family. So here we go.
Here we go. What ideas should be open and free for discussion right now on the city of Isle of Palms?
Open and free discussion on all of the issues of Isle of Palms, quite frankly. I've talked to a lot of citizens who are confused or misled, and they don't feel like they've had access to their government. There's been a lot of drama surrounding city-owned property. Really, there's just a lot of issues right now that if we had an open government who, really represented everybody rather than their select group of friends, I think we would have a lot more stable situation than we have right now on the island, which is a lot of court battles and litigation and animosity, quite frankly.
And you also said this too, quote, "Local action has national impact." What local actions on the Isle of Palms have actually had a national impact?
Well, I think if you run for local office, I think that's the greatest thing you can do as a citizen. And we're seeing what's happening around the country with school boards and city councils and how much power our fellow citizens, quite frankly, have over us. And if you want to be a part of the change in your community, the only thing you can do is run for local office. When you run for local office, you're going to be part of the national conversation. I think this last 18 months has really shown us how much power local governments have. And it's really important for me to be a part of that local government at this point, because I don't feel like my values have been represented on my local government. And so when you run for local office, you're having an impact beyond your community. And we're all in this together. So it's really important that citizens run for local office. I've been harping that for the last 18 months, and now it's time for me to put my money where my mouth is.
For the past 18 months, I know that you've been on social media, and I know you've been not happy about what's going on in the Isle of Palms. And some people I spoke to say, hey, he's gone too far. He's attacked a lot of people who've taken a stand on certain issues. How can you be a leader?
Well, I want to be a leader because I want to be honest and direct. And sometimes the truth is hard to hear for people. And my opponent, one, has been on city council for the last 20 years, and I'm struggling to find what he has to show for it, quite frankly. My other opponent was the top vote getter in the last council election. I actually voted for him. Um, I won't be voting for him this time. Um, and I think he's made a lot of people upset with his policy decisions. So I'm not going to stop talking. I'm not going to stop speaking the truth. I try to be as respectful as I can. I try to be open. I've also received a lot of hate and criticism, but that comes with the job when you're running for public office, and I'm ready for it. But I think a leader is going to tell you how it is without trying to treat you like a child. We're all grown ups here, and we need the truth, and we need to have the truth in a way that's not dishonest. I know that's a weird way of saying it, but there's a saying when you're a lawyer, there's three sides to every story. There's your side, their side, and then the truth. So I'm just trying to find the truth as much as I can.
What is the truth thus far when it comes to the issues on the Isle of Palms?
How much time you got, Quintin? In my opinion, the truth is our government has not really represented all of the island. It's divided. There's a large community where I live, Wild Dunes, that's in the background right here. It's a gated community. It's been a private community for decades, but even people that live outside of the gates really dislike the people that live inside of the gates, and I think probably vice versa. And I'm running to really change that. I think we all need to get on the same page if we're going to move forward. I also think that we need to get on the same page with Mount Pleasant and Sullivan's Island and surrounding cities. Right now, they just focus on the barrier islands. I really think we need to have an alliance with Mount Pleasant rather than an adversarial relationship. Mount Pleasant is the fourth largest city in the state. North Charleston is the third largest city in the state. Charleston is the largest city in the state, and we're the barrier island where a lot of the region goes and enjoys the sun, and I think they should. And right now, we have leaders who just aren't representing those values, quite frankly. And it's been really disappointing for me to see it because, in my opinion, the beach is a place that God gave us to enjoy the sun and enjoy nature and enjoy beauty. And when they voted to close down the beaches, that's when I woke up. My family stayed out of local politics. We live on an island. My parents live here. My grandmother lives here. My kids live here. I mean, we're busy with our family. And after seeing the beaches shut down and the types of, in my opinion, over control that happened, I started to really pay attention. And I have to tell you, it's like an iceberg. I feel like as soon as I hit something, there's something deeper and deeper and deeper to it.
I got to go back to what you said earlier on Twitter. You said local action has national impact. Specifically, what local action has actually had an impact nationally?
Well, I think Isle of Palms is a barrier island, so there's obviously wildlife interest. There's the offshore drilling interest. I mean, there's a lot of national impact when it comes to real estate. I mean, there's a lot of people from all around the country, all around the world that comes here. I mean, it's an important island, but that statement in particular is more meant for citizens to get engaged in their local government. We see what's happening nationally, and the way that we got there, in my opinion, is because the people in the local governments weren't doing their jobs, and citizens rested on their laurels. Good, patriotic American citizens haven't run for office in a long time, and I think it trickles down and it trickles up. When you have bad people in local office, it can set a bad precedent for when something on the national stage happens, like COVID, quite frankly. And we're seeing this play out. If you want to have the national conversation, we're seeing this play out in South Carolina, where the state government has been very adamant that we are free people here in South Carolina and we are independent to make our own choices. And then some of the local governments are revolting against the state government when there's well-settled law that in South Carolina, emergency powers rest with the governor, period. That's why you haven't seen local cities enact mask ordinances since. It's settled law. And then the South Carolina Supreme Court just ruled this week that school mask mandates are illegal, and that was a unanimous vote. And so these are national issues. These are local people that are deciding the issues, but it has a national impact because people from all over the world are looking at South Carolina right now with these masks. They're looking at us, and And I am of the opinion that our governor is a leader. He's leading us through this. And now it's time for us to do our part as citizens and get involved in the local government.
How have you been involved with local government besides just, as many people are saying, suing the local government?
So my lawsuit. So I was approached by concerned citizens over a year ago. Just a lot of different, like I said, there hasn't been a lot of access to government, and they didn't feel like they were getting the answer. So I started to dig a little bit, and I just kept finding more and more things. So I sent my first Freedom of Information Act request in September of 2020. It's been a year. I can't even believe that, because it's still not been fully responded to. And then I sent another one in November of 2020 because I found out there were group text messages between council members, which are not really easily discoverable under the Freedom of Information Act unless you know what you're looking for. So it's taken a lot of energy just to kind of get underneath the tip of that iceberg, so to speak. But in the city threw 3 different law firms in my face trying to deter me, to obstruct me from getting access to these. I finally got access to some of the group text messages, and one of them had every single city council person on it, and it lasted from March until I only got access from March through December, but that's almost an entire year of city council, an entire city council on a private group message thread discussing city business. And my jaw dropped to the floor. There are cases that this has happened in other states, but it hasn't happened like this in South Carolina, at least so blatantly. So I just felt a moral obligation to pursue this, not only on my behalf, but on behalf of the people who reached out to me and asked me to look into this. And I did it under my own name because that's what a leader does, is they take the heat for their supporters. And a lot of my supporters have actually asked to be remained anonymous because they don't want to get attacked by people. I mean, that's the kind of vitriol, I guess, that is happening right now. I guess all over the country, quite frankly, but here too. So that's where we are, and I'm waiting on the judge. We're waiting on the judge right now. We asked for a preliminary injunction. The courts are just so busy right now, and so I don't know how long my case is going to take to get litigated, and I don't want any records to be destroyed or deleted, or I just want access to what I'm owed to as a citizen, which are public records. So we're waiting on the judge. It's actually been over a month since our hearing, so that should come out any day now.
How transparent will you be if you're elected mayor?
As transparent as I can. I try to give my cell phone out to everybody. I try to put all my thoughts out there. I'm not on social media anymore except on Twitter. And that's kind of the platform that I use to help disseminate my thoughts. I'm an open book. I'm probably too much of an open book sometimes. But my goal is, once elected mayor, is to steer the conversation away from executive session discussions, discussions that are rehearsed. I mean, when I was doing my FOIA request, this old city council would rehearse like who is going to make a motion, who's going to second the motion. It's like a play that we were watching being produced before the meetings, and a lot of citizens were like, these meetings aren't making sense. It's like they've talked about this and decided before. So I don't think that's productive. I think we're elected to be transparent. I think discussions should happen at city council meetings out in the open. No more Zoom, no more group text messages. That needs to stop immediately. We need to have business conversations, city business conversations on your city email with your city addresses that are able to be easily discovered by the public, because this is not a private business. A lot of the current city council members are corporate people who are used to like private companies and how private boards work and not so much government boards. And you can tell they're running it like that. They're running it like a private business rather than a public government. I think that's why nobody's running for re-election. They've gotten a lot of heat these last 18 months at least, and I think even before then too.
How do you get off social media, Mr. Hooser? and actually create conversations with a shared common ground with the voters and residents of the Isle of Palms?
Well, you need to listen. You need to listen, and I try to treat every conversation with an open mind. I'm an imperfect man. We are all sinners. We are all imperfect, um, and I might be wrong. Shocking, right? But I try to listen to everybody with an open mind, and I try to explain where I'm at. So if people, it's been hard to meet in person over the last year. I've tried to meet with the council members. Not everybody's been wanting to meet with me. So I'm happy to meet in person if anybody ever wants to do that too. Um, and, like I said, at the end of the day, I think the most important part is to listen with an open mind, because that has not been happening right now.
Have you been able to meet with any of the current male candidates or your opposition?
Actually, yes, I have. Mr. Pounds, he met with me, and we had a really nice conversation. I think Philip Pounds is a very nice person. I don't agree with him on policy at all. And what I told him was, I just want a fair process, and whatever happens at the end, whether my view wins or loses, as long as we have an opportunity to flesh out the details and talk about it and have an open and fair vote, fine. That's what I told him. Ryan Buchanan is the other person. I talked to him at the beginning of COVID, and he kind of told me some tall tales about what city council's responsibilities were. I don't think he understood I was a lawyer. And he was trying to tell me what the law was. And then I found his text messages, and it was opposite again of what he was saying. So I've tried to meet with him. He doesn't really respond as much. So it is what it is. I'm kind of shocked because he's been on city council for the last 20 years. You would think he would have this down already. Talking to constituents, you'd think he'd have this part down. But I was disappointed. So,
what's more important for the Isle of Palms right now? Building new homes and commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, or even better utilizing the existing homes?
really, that's a good question. I think we've had a lot of overdevelopment on the island, and if I can, this ties into it. So
Okay.
in South Carolina, we have a public interest in states. In beaches,
Okay.
and every state's different. But in South Carolina, the citizens of the state own the beaches. Right? Isle of Palms has been so catered towards people who don't even live in South Carolina or in the region. You've heard the term McMansions. I think that, they obviously bring in a lot of money. There's a lot of wealthy people who want to live at the beach, and, that's great, but it's changed the character of the island immensely. And council just put something into place where they're trying to save the smaller ranch homes. And so these big mansions aren't being built, which I completely support. I'm kind of curious as to why it took so long to do that. We have Wild Dunes, which is kind of like the resort area. Outside of the gates, it's becoming almost like a resort now instead of a community. And that's sad. And I know a lot of people do not like to see that happen.
And I want to get to the question, another question with you in regards to that in just a moment. But how will you maintain and enhance the existing residential and commercial character of the island and provide for compatible, appropriate, and high quality development and redevelopment?
That's a great question. I think that the amenities on this island have been neglected. I fully support rehabbing the beach access paths, adding restrooms, adding ADA compliant walkways for the disabled. I think, like I said, God gave us the sun and the beach, and everybody should be able to enjoy that for free. They shouldn't have to pay to do it. We have a lot of tax revenue sources from these short-term rentals from Wild Dunes that covers the cost of everything. The people in Wild Dunes the people in Isle of Palms citizens do not pay high taxes. I know that's shocking for a lot of people to understand, but 75% of our tax revenue comes from short-term rentals in Wild Dunes. So our citizens here are very, very lucky to not pay taxes. Now, what do we do with that money, right? There's a lot of issues facing the city in terms of drainage. There's flooding issues, as pretty much everywhere in this region. But there are a lot of issues with drainage, and there are a lot of boring projects that the city is just kind of neglected. I know they're working on it, but if you want my honest opinion, we need to do a better job at engaging the region. We've been acting like we're in this alone when the state owns most of the roads. The county has a huge park. Like, this island is very much a regional island, as much as people don't want to hear that. So if we can engage the region, maybe they'll help fund those, beach access upgrades. Maybe for the Front Beach area, there's a lot of land that's, in my opinion, underdeveloped there. I think, having traveled to a lot of different beach communities and seeing how their town centers work, I would love to upgrade the Front Beach area. I'm hoping that the beach reach shuttle continues, and we work out the kinks with that and make Isle of Palms a really warm and welcoming place that's catered towards the region, more towards out-of-towners. Because right now I feel like we've been neglecting the region, and that's got to stop.
Was the beach reach shuttle a failure?
I saw the pictures of people who have went to the beach for the first time in their lives, and the joy on their faces, and I don't see how anybody could call that a failure. I just don't. So we live in a coastal community. There needs to be access to the beach, period. I think there's money to pay for it, and if we're going to have conversations about whether it's worth the money or not worth the money, that's fine. But I think we should do everything in our power to keep it. I think it's been a success just for the fact that people who did not have access to the beach before now have access to it, for sure.
How would you help Carter promote this as a city?
Well, I think Isle of Palms, if we're busing people in, I think we could help not just the businesses on the Front Beach area, advertise their services too. So when people are coming in, they know where to get lunch. Maybe we could have deals for people. If they're riding the shuttle, you can create packages like that. I think the city's marketed it. It's been kind of strange though, because they switched the drop-off spot. So I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes. Like I said, when they have meetings, they kind of tell us a little bit of what's going on, but not a lot. So I'm hoping they don't try to cancel it, because there's opportunities there to enrich the experience, not just for the people that are riding the bus, but for the businesses at the end of the bus stop too. I don't think they even focused on that at all this summer.
What else should they focus on, Joshua?
Well, the first thing that I want them to do is engage the region for an unbiased, comprehensive study on the development in the region. Like I said, Mount Pleasant, North Charleston, and Charleston are 3 of the top 4 largest cities in the state. And we can put our thumbs in our ears and say, la, 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 all we want, but that's not stopping. And it's certainly not going away. So I'd like to engage the region and have all of the governments on the same page as to what the development has done. What's the impact? For example, I would love for Mount Pleasant to say, this is what we looked like in 2000, this is what we looked like in 2010, this is what we looked like in 2020. Here's where the big apartment communities were put, here's where the neighborhoods were put, here's where the traffic is, right? Here, Isle of Palms, now you can see what we have. And then Isle of Palms says, oh, look, this is what we've done. Wild Dunes built a new hotel, so there's a lot of traffic at the end of the island. We have the Carta stop. Maybe we can do something around the bus stop there. We're opening up spots down at Breach Inlet. These are the new businesses that have opened. These are the what is the traffic flow? What are your drainage issues? I think a lot of people don't understand that we've not done that. We did a study where they tracked the number of cars going on and off the island. That's not, it tells you some information, but that's not all the information. And with the bike lanes on the connector, I would love to see the bike lane extended to Wild Dunes. I would love to see Palm Boulevard Right now they have the public parking spaces in the grass. I would love to see that redone and have like a dedicated bike lane, make really nice parking there for everybody. Um, we talk about cost with that. We obviously need to include, the fact that the public has the right to free access in that decision. But I think that's the biggest issue is the development. And that's happening all around the region. That's why I think we all need to be on the same page because we're all in this together, right? We're all neighbors no matter where our address is. And I think we need to start acting like it.
How many more bus stops should they have added to this Beach Street shuttle?
Well, I think you can't put the cart before the horse. So I think we need to perfect this one now, to figure out if this, like I said, they changed the bus stop, like the end of it, like not really that long after so we need to work out the kinks to that, and we have time to do it, but we need to get past the conversation about whether if this is going to happen, right? Like either we're going to keep this in place or we're not. And I don't think we're past that conversation yet, unfortunately. I'd like to see us get past that conversation first, that we're going to keep this in place, right?
Does the Alpha Palm actually have money to keep funding Carter for this shuttle?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, does Carter have enough money to continue to fund the shuttle? Or, excuse me, Alpha Palms?
Alpha Palms has money to do things. It's just whether or not there's the will to do it. And I know Carta has been a really good advocate for it. So I'm hoping that Carta can put pressure on them to keep it, because I do think Alpha Palms has the money. But that's definitely a conversation if you get to adding stops, if you add amenities to the stop, which I think they should, you know what I mean? That might cost money too, but with all these COVID relief funds, I mean, cities are getting flooded with money. So I think there'd be enough money there to deal with it for sure.
What strategies would you implement that will promote the economic vitality and the financial stability of the Alpha Palms while maintaining its residential character and preserving its natural beauty?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are a solvent island. Miracle. That's a miracle because the city council, the taxpayer-owned property has been mismanaged for decades. The leases they enter into cheat us out of revenue. Right now, the new Marina restaurant, they voted to not accept rent from them because they're having a hard time, which I sympathize with them, but that whole process was very controversial. They felt like it was rigged, and a waterfront restaurant on a barrier island on a marina is prime real estate. And a lot of people have hard feelings about that because that's lost tax revenue to the city. I think a lot of people here are just so used to wild dunes and other short-term rentals being cash cows that they forget that we still need to have other sources of revenue. Then they sued Tidal Wave Water Sports, which is just the strangest thing. It was, now I know more about it. It seems more personal than anything, but they have not accepted rent from them. So they're just like not accepting rent. And I don't understand how they can sit there and say that they're managing the city very well. I don't know if they have said that because it probably would be a lie. But you hear the term diversify your portfolio with your personal finances. Right now, we are not diversified. 75% of our revenue comes from wild dunes and short-term rentals. So I know Philip Pounds has been working on the budget a lot for that, and I commend him for that. There's a lot more to do with it, but we are a solvent island. We did bleed money just like every other city during COVID. They tried to kind of arrange the numbers around to make it seem like we didn't, but we did bleed money. So I think if we just have an honest conversation about where our tax revenue comes from, we're going to be able to figure out how to diversify that portfolio, like I said.
What would be the other revenue sources that you would come up with to bring to the city?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is figure out what our assets are, because you have your equity and you have your revenue, right? So your equity is like, we own this land, this land's not going away unless a hurricane comes. This land has a value. And then you have the income that comes from that land. So they're not, so right now we're kind of losing on both ends because the land that we do have is not being developed to its potential. They're kind of, getting their friends involved in these businesses and instead of everything being on the merit. So we need to do that. They've actually talked about raising taxes. This current council has. I'm not a taxes person. I try to never, ever even bring up the idea of raising taxes. But I think if you're talking about bigger projects like that they want to take on, they're talking about raising taxes. I think we could help our revenue if we just talk to the county and the state and our grown-ups with them and ask them for money because they have a lot more money than we do. And that could help us bring expenses down and help our revenue if we're not spending this money of our own money on something, we're using the state's money or the county's money, if that makes sense.
How would you
it's a tourist island. There's no way around it. So, I mean, it is what it is. But
how would you create a business preservation alliance?
A business preservation alliance. Well, there's already alliances on the island. When it comes to something that would be more like a chamber, I would love to see that. I would love to see that. A formal organization that represents the island businesses. It does something like that as a formality doesn't exist right now. And I know a lot of the business owners have had like meetings with the mayor, like just random meetings, and the mayor, at least they've said that the mayor's lied to them and stuff. If you had an organization that could take on that, where the businesses were members, I think those types of conversations would be a lot more productive. I don't know if it's what people want though, quite frankly.
What is the existing land use on the island?
Land use. Well, you'll have to be more specific with that question. There's a lot of different uses. So there's public land, there's private land, and then there's the beaches, and then there's the intercoastal waterways. So everything's a little different depending on what you're talking about. So, for example, at the marina, it's zoned commercially. So they're trying to put in a public park. What they're not telling the public is that when you have land that's on an intercoastal waterway that's regulated by not just the federal government but the state government, you can't just willy-nilly change things around. There's processes and regulations that you have to go through to do that. When you're talking about right by in between Breach Inlet and Front Beach, where they're starting to add more parking, there's contracts that were written by the beach company in the city decades ago that basically gave a private company right to public roads, like parking on public roads. I know the state's looking into that. It's really strange. So there's different types of uses depending on where you are on the island and how it's categorized, and then what types of private contracts are there too. I hope I answered your question.
And speaking of parking, what type of public parking would you have along 42nd Avenue?
I am fully supportive of that being an ADA ramp. I'm fully supportive of that. I think parking is harder. You can't create land where there's not land, but there are ways to do it. I think at least handicap spots there would be fantastic. Like I said, there's not really a lot of places for people who want to enjoy the beach can enjoy the beach. And then the parking that's all along Palm Boulevard right there, they just put in crosswalks in between 41st and 57th. And they're so fantastic. I live around that area and I was scared. Like I walking my dog because of the car. So I'm so excited for those crosswalks. And there's parking there too.
Okay.
So like I said, you can't create land where there's not land, but where the land is now, you can be creative to add parking spots. The people so far have just not wanted to do it. There hasn't been a desire for people to add parking spots, and I think we all know why. It's because There's a big concern that with all the development here, that the residential character of the community is being lost. And but like I said, at the end of the day, the state law trumps, and the state says that these beaches are public,
Yes,
and
sir.
that it is what it is.
Yes, sir. What has been the growth rate on the Alva Palms in the past 10 years?
So my understanding, I don't even think it's been just the last 10 years. I think just the last couple of years. I thought I heard Mayor Carroll say that primary residents have grown by 20%, which is dramatic for a small island.
Yes,
There are a
sir.
lot of people that have second homes here, and I think during the pandemic they moved here and made their primary home. That's just my assumption.
Okay. And what is that historical population trend for the city of Alva Palms?
I mean, we're not very high right now. I think there's 1,800 registered voters, but there's so many people who aren't residents who spend 5, 6 months out of the year here, and so it's hard to track those. I think they say that there's around 4 or 5 thousand, um, but I don't think there's really any way of knowing. It's hard to gauge what home's a short term rental versus who's staying there when. Is it all short term? Do the people stay there 5 months out of the year, rent it out the other 6? It's really hard to track things like that. And I think a study, like I said, a comprehensive study on the growth and development could help answer those questions for us.
What are the total housing units on the Alva Palms?
The number,
Yes,
I
sir.
have,
Total.
I don't know the number of houses off the top of my head, but it's significantly more than. There are more homes here than primary residents.
How many of those units are actually occupied, and how many of those units are vacant?
And that's almost an impossible question to answer because of the high number of short-term rentals. Because when you get a business license for a short-term rental, you don't say whether or not you occupy it. It's just you're doing a business out of it. I know in Wild Dunes, I mean, there's so many apartment buildings here, condo buildings in Wild Dunes within the resort. I don't know if half of them are short-term rentals, if half of the people live there. I mean, it's almost hit or miss. You never really know. So those metrics are really hard to gauge.
Okay.
I will say that the trend has been, unfortunately, longtime residents are being pushed out because it's too expensive, and then these houses are being bought up by investors and turned into short-term rentals. And that's not. I think we're past our peak with that, and we need to not let that happen anymore. We need to be very vigilant in making sure that the residential community is not lost, because we have a resort on the island. Wild Dunes is a big chunk of land. Outside of the gate should not turn into another resort. I don't think anybody wants that, and I think it is on the verge of violating state law, quite frankly, because of the public use that I was talking about with the beaches.
Okay. This might be another question that you might not know, Mr. Hooser, but let me ask you: how many of those homes on the Alva Palms are actually owner occupied?
Yeah, that's a good question because, like I said, it depends on if you're talking about single family homes or condo units. That's something that I think we need to research and study and figure that part out. I don't know if anybody's ever done that. I really don't.
Are you concerned about potentially increased costs of rent for housing on the Alva Palms?
Yes, of course. I've talked to people who were born here and then they were pushed out of the island either because somebody gave them an offer they couldn't refuse for their house, or for whatever reason, their kids moved and like empty nesters, they wanted to downsize, and then the houses just shoot up in value, and then they can't get moved back onto the island. So it's been an issue. But I have to tell you, nationally, real estate is an issue, though, and it's an issue that we're going to be dealing with these evictions happening. Even homes here, multi-million-dollar homes, are starting to be foreclosed on. I mean, we have renters here, so I don't think that we're going to be completely devoid of that problem. And it's something that nationally we're going to have really, really tough conversations and this is happening with Airbnb and all this stuff too. I mean, there's just so much that's going on with real estate versus residential versus short term in the last 10 years. And I think I think people are finally starting to understand that it's a big problem.
Well, Dan, let me ask you. Well, hey, let me just put it out there. How many of those homes are actually renter occupied?
Do you mean by short-term rentals or by people who stay there for like a year lease? Or
Yeah, you can talk about both of those. Yes, sir.
I think short-term rentals definitely outnumber the longer leases. I'm not sure what the statistics are versus renters versus owners. I think that would probably have to go into that study that we would do too.
What is the typical household type actually on the Isle of Palms?
Depends on where you are. So in Wild Dunes, for example, you have it's broken into houses, condo buildings, and then hotels and short-term rentals. Outside of the gates, there used to be a lot of single family ranch homes, but a lot of those homes have been demolished. So people come in, they buy the land, they demolish the houses, and they build these huge, huge houses. And it's happened so rapidly. I don't know how you would even measure that. I really don't. I think what people are starting to understand is they're looking at it. Do you know what I mean? They're like, oh, that house. I mean, you drive down Palm Boulevard, it's just insane the number of houses that have been demolished. It's insane. It's almost like every house, and it's still happening. And these huge houses are being put up, and then it's not people living in them. It's like families of 20 and 30 coming in and staying there for a week, and then they leave, and then the next week a new family of 20 or 30 comes in and stays there, and then they leave, and so it's just a revolving door of people. If you go into the south part of the island, there's a lot of residential neighborhoods there too,
Right.
but everything's kind of all mixed together. You go on a street, every other house will be resident, short-term rental, resident, short-term rental.
Yes, sir. And let me ask you, as the sun is coming into my eyes here, what are the household incomes on the Isle of Palms?
So the median income is actually very deceiving. I think it's actually lower than Mount Pleasant the last time I checked, because a lot of people here are retired, and so they're not bringing in an income. So those statistics are actually a little misleading. If you look at net worth, Isle of Palms is one of the wealthiest islands, if not the wealthiest island or city in the state. I think it's between Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island. The big condo buildings here, I think, bring down the values. Because in Wild Dunes, there's huge condo buildings along the beach. And all of those units are small, one bedrooms. So I think they bring down the volume. Because on Sullivan's Island, it's huge houses. It's all houses, basically, on Sullivan's Island. I don't know if there's any huge condo buildings on Sullivan's. So,
yes, sir. Yeah. And yes, sir. And how many homes on the island have been built at a fairly consistent rate?
Do you mean like price per square foot when you're building something, or do you mean like speed?
Yeah, a fairly consistent rate. Yes, sir. You can talk about both. Let's just talk about that.
Well, it's really expensive right now to build anything and anywhere. And then I'll have to tell you, I try to get something done, like we're trying to redo our bathroom, and then they find out we live in Wild Dunes. They're like, oh, you have money, we're going to double charge you. So we do it ourselves. We're a young family. We don't have that kind of money. We're here because we're by my parents and my grandma. And we live in a humble house, and we're very blessed and very thankful to be able to live on an island like this.
I know that you keep a track of the Isle of Palms and obviously Isle of Palms City Council. How many infrastructure projects have been completed over the past 4 years there?
How many infrastructure projects? Well, depends on what you define as infrastructure, as we're figuring out. I think if you want to talk about most of the infrastructure projects, they've been by the state, not by the city. So there's not a really big infrastructure project that pops up. I mean, if you want to consider the marina infrastructure, they've included docks there. They've redone that. I mean, they have tried to kind of upgrade some of the amenities, but when I think infrastructure, I think drainage ditches, roads, bridges. Like, I think of the basic infrastructure, and I don't think we've done any of that.
Would you be in favor of creating a financial task force to research comparable both revenue and expenses from outside sources to assist in the future budget process for the city?
Depends on who's on it and what it is. I'm not a big bureaucracy guy. I think we have a lot of committees here already on the island. So it really that would have to be a question depending on who's on it and who's in charge of it and, what their goal is. We have a lot of committees.
Yes, indeed. And how many businesses have actually closed on the island, obviously due to the COVID?
A lot of, actually a lot. A lot of if you go down on Front Street, there's either new owners or new businesses in most of the restaurants. Some of them have stayed, that weathered the storm. But there has been a turnover, and I'm not saying that's bad. Some of these new restaurants might be better in those spots, but I mean, I'm count just on that Front Beach area alone. I'm counting it, a few on a hand. So, and then in terms of non-restaurant businesses, I'm not sure, but I need to figure that out.
How much tax revenue has the island lost in the past 4 years?
Well, if you want to talk the past 4 years, that's going to be a little bit of a different conversation because the last 2 years has really impacted that. But I think if you look at the numbers, I mean, we lost, I'm trying to get off the top of my head. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we lost, 6 figures at least from the short-term rent. I mean, they shut down the hotels here. And for a budget, when 75% of your budget's coming from short-term rentals and the resort, when you shut down the resort and the short-term rentals, you're going to take a hit. I think they're averaging it out with the COVID relief funds. So whether or not we actually have a loss, I think is going to be a question at the end of the day when they get that COVID money and figure all that out. I think right now the numbers that they have that Philip Towns put together, there's no loss on the spreadsheet.
And speaking of obviously questions, a lot of people still have questions about trying to hire a new fire chief at Isle of Palms. How will you change the city code as far as hiring in the future?
So they want to change the city code. I think our whole city code probably needs to be looked at. The city is set up, a lot of people don't understand this. It's set up that we have a weak mayor form of government. And I don't mean that the mayor is a weak person. Right, I mean that they don't have powers. Right. So a strong mayor form of government, the mayor can veto things. They have special powers that exist outside of their one vote for items. Here, everybody has a vote. Everybody's vote's equal. The mayor has a little bit, like some emergency powers, but not really. So I think that's an important distinction to understand as we move forward. And I don't know if a lot of people understand that either.
Yes, sir. And let me ask you this, because people are still obviously talking about the fire chief, and obviously there's a big news about the South Carolina Professional Firefighters Association, which actually raised concerns about the Isle of Palms fire pay and how low it is. How do you reward high performance for firefighters?
It's embarrassing. Somebody who's putting themselves in harm's way should not be paid like that. I mean, nobody should be paid like that, but somebody who's definitely putting themselves in harm's way shouldn't. This is an example, unfortunately, of politics, personal petty politics, getting in the way of city business. And I don't know how to do it. The city administrator, our government set up that the city administrators, like the CEOs, the city administrator runs the city, usually manages the staff, the day-to-day decisions. But these department heads, these chiefs, like I think that's a little different, and I think the council should have a role in that. I don't know what the role should be after seeing what's happened with the fire chief. That was a mess. So the city administrator has to have oversight, though. That's really important. Um, because I think right now what's happened is she's made the police chief the public safety chief, which is makes him the fire chief,
Right.
which I don't think council gave her that power. So we definitely need to look at it and clean up any ambiguities that are there, because while she might have the power to manage staff, she doesn't have the power just to create important positions that don't exist otherwise. That would be council's job to do that. So this is a very complicated issue. It shouldn't be. It should be very simple. Who's the best person for the job? Let's give them the job. Not let's try to micromanage and control everything. And that's what's happened, in my opinion.
And what is your plan? What is your parking management plan for the future?
Well, that's why I want to study, because you need to have the information before we implement the solution, right? You need to gather all your information. And right now, we are in an age of a lot of misinformation. Who owns the streets? Who can charge for parking? We don't even agree on the basic facts right now. And we need to have that information before we can move forward. Moving forward, I anticipate that information to say that our parking and infrastructure is woefully outdated. It is needing to be updated. And I also think we will see that some of the public parking spots that are free are not the end-all be-all that a lot of people are thinking that they are. It could be a lot different, and I'll give you an example. Folly Beach. If you go to Folly Beach, you know that people park all up and down those side streets, right? Like, they park all up and down those side streets. That's what Isle of Palms used to be like. And then in 2015, the city leaders came into an agreement with the state where they eliminated the side street parking because of the danger to the residential community, because of all the kids playing and all that, so they didn't want everybody on the side streets. So they put them on Palm Boulevard, like the main drag right there. Well, then they started to kind of, and some people remember where people were, 3 cars parked deep parallel parking on Palm Boulevard. It was just kind of chaos. The city didn't manage it. The state did, kind of left it up to the city. The city kind of neglected it. And then the city started to eliminate the parking spots. And they did it really quietly and under the radar. Okay. And then COVID happened, and then they eliminated all of the parking spots. And that was a lawsuit that was filed by the beach group and the county. Right. And then what the court said was, okay, we're not going to touch this right now because of COVID and we're in our charter territory. But what they did say is had this not be COVID, you would 100% not have this right to do it. So that was actually a very bad court case for the city. They don't market it like that. They marketed it as a win, but that was not a win. What that court case did was it solidified control with the state. So then what happened is they tried to have all these court battles, and then the state government came in and said, no, we're not going to have any of this. And then the state government came and passed a law requiring the state approval before anything happens. So I can sit here and say, I want this to happen, 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 this should be like this shouldn't be like this. But unless the state agrees, it don't matter, right? Like, we need to get the state on board. And so I'm hoping that as we move forward and people that live on this island start to understand what our rights and responsibilities are as citizens of a barrier island, that we'll be able to comprehensively come up with a plan that everybody's on board with, right? That, to me, that's not eliminating any more parking spots. No more. What's here is the floor, in my opinion. We only go up from here. Now, how far up? I don't know. The state's studying that right now. There's private contracts that are coming to play. A lot of people want to open the Wild Dunes gates up. That's not going to happen. There are private communities all throughout the country. I was making a joke. I was like, you want to come into Wild Dunes? I'll go to Mar-a-Lago where Trump lives. I'm ready. I'll pack my bags. I'll be able to go in there. It's just not the way that it works. But the private contracts that are outside of the Wild Dunes gates, because they don't own that property, I think those need to be looked at, right? So I think it's complex, it's complicated, but it's also simple. We just need to all get on the same page and realize that Isle of Palms isn't the king. The state, unfortunately, has all the power here. and we can do what we can, but we're not going to be eliminating any more parking spots. And I think the people here need to get that out of their heads that that's going to happen. And if city leaders are telling them that they're going to be eliminating more parking spots, shame on them, because that's not realistic and it's not going to happen.
Unfortunately, I'm running out of time, but we'll continue this conversation about the parking in depth in October. But Joshua Hooser, thank you for your time. And again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin Close-Ups.
Thank you, sir. I have so much respect for you, and I'll continue following your journey.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.